After studying microbiology at university, Apiwe Nxusani worked as a brewmaster for SAB. Apiwe is very involved in training and promoting the beer industry in South Africa. Please welcome Apiwe Nxusani-Mawela to the show. My name is Holger Meyer and this is Beer World. Apiwe Nxusani-Mawela, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Apiwe, we first met, I think it was about 2014. You were still working for Brewhogs, but you got into craft beer long before that.
Yes.
And you were one of the few privileged one at SAB to actually brew beer or small batch beer. And I was very excited when I heard about Fransen Street. Tell us a little bit about the early days with SAB.
Yeah, so I joined SAB straight out of varsity. I actually got a bursary from the company to do my honors microbiology. Then I trained as a brewer, and then worked different positions within the company. And it was in 2011 that I got to work at Fransen Street Brewery. So my role was to reopen the brewery, and I got involved in the craft beer space. I think that back then in 2011, we're starting to really get going. So I used to brew for different festivals. So I brewed for Clarence. At the time, SAB used to sponsor Clarence, and Solstice, Cape Town Festival of Beer. And then we also had the October 1st that SAB used to run with Bar. So that was an interesting time for me. I got to meet a whole lot of different brewers who started their own company, breweries, and got to know about the different beer styles, got to meet a whole lot of home brewers, and kind of fell in love with the whole craft thing.
And it was more about the community than the beer, wasn't it?
Yes, definitely.
Apiwe, what was SAB's intention with Fransen Street?
So at that time when I joined, it was more to celebrate the beer culture. Okay. And I know at that time we used to sponsor a lot of festivals. And for me, in that role, I would just be told, brew something, tell us what you're making. So there was no, it was not like there was no restrictions. But I know Fransen Street over the time, once I'd left, they started making more commercial beers, which were available in pubs. But at that time, in my time, we were just brewing, playing around different styles for different festivals, and just being part of that whole craft revolution, which was for me quite interesting, and I think it ignited the passion for creativity within me.
Mm-hmm. What was the most interesting besides Fransen Street, where you could play craft brewer?
I think for me, the early days were very interesting. Coming out of school, not really knowing what being a brewer means or what beer making is about.
Yeah.
Early 20s, and being in Ulukwane, when I moved there, I didn't know a soul. I made many friends. We had in terms of the learning how to become a brewer. I was taught by like great brewers. I mean, Danny Odendal was actually my first boss when I joined SAP. He was my brewmaster at the time. So being taught by people that had the time, that love sharing. There's many guys. I remember there was an old man who had worked at that brewery since day one, and he knew every valve, every corner, and I just went under his wing, and he used to share quite a lot. And I think for me, those are some of the learnings that as I grew and got into, and when I left SAP and moving to starting my own company, using those learnings as which have come in handy also for me. So for me, that is like a nice memory.
Yeah. So we first met when you worked at Brewhogs. How did you end up there?
So, 2011, 2012, I was at Fransen. Life was good. Then it so happens that I think within the company there was a bit of shift in what the company wanted to do. So I was moved back to normal brewery. So I headed up a one of the plants. So for me it was not as exciting as
Okay.
I think afterwards. And I think also during that time I got to meet the pioneers of the industry, like guys from Darling. I think Jack Black was actually also at that time just getting going. At the time CBC was just starting. Also met Chris from Boston, Natalie from Clarence. So I got to interact with all these wonderful people who were sharing how they got to start their own companies. And I was getting good reviews on my beers, you make good beers. Why are you not doing this? You know how it is with home brewers and brewers, where we convince ourselves that just making good beer is enough to start your brewery. But yeah, so it started from that. And then I was introduced to Mike and Paddy, who owns the Hogshead pub. And they were looking at setting up their own brewery, brew pub actually, and then we formed a partnership, and that's how we started Brewhogs.
They exist primarily to supply their own brew pubs. Was that like that then?
Yeah. So the initial idea was to actually build a brew pub.
Okay.
So it was to build a brewery within one of the pubs, but obviously learned that in Gauteng, the laws don't allow to do that. So the brewery has to be in an industrial area.
Yeah.
So that's when then we shifted to actually then building a brewery separately, which would then still feed the pubs, and then try to also make the pubs like you feel that you are in, the brewery and the pubs feel like one thing, even though they might be in different locations.
Yeah. And what was the response in the early days?
No, in the early days, this was back 2014, 2015. It was a great time for South African craft. I think at that time we're starting to move to really more commercial. I think before that we had a few commercial, but mainly people were moving from being home brewers to, growing from being home brewers. And at that time we started having, quality was starting to improve, availability was starting to improve. Where we also had, I think, the guys from the tap room who were also doing installing taps, which is something wasn't there, let's say, 2012, 2013. So the uptake, Brewhogs, we were doing quite well. It was a 3,000 per batch brewery, and we had very good distribution available throughout Gauteng and also in the Western Cape. So it was quite a good time.
Okay, and when did you start doing contract brewing for other people? So
the model was always a bit of contracting. So
at Brewhogs.
At Brewhogs, yes. So from the onset, it's just that one of the problems we had, which is actually what led me to opening up my own brewery, was the volume, like 3,000 liters. If you are just starting out, you don't have any route to market. You're just starting a brand that you don't even know how to be received. 3,000 liters might actually quite be a lot for you to then try and move. Obviously, having had to pay for it up front and then try sell, and knowing that the product had a short shelf life.
Yeah.
So in 2015, I actually started my own company, Brewster's Craft, because when we started Brewhogs, one of the things I did tell the guys that I do not want to just work at a brewery, because that's what I used to do at SAB. I'd like to do bigger things or more things. And I started Brewster's Craft at that time. For me, the thinking was more to do the training and the consulting, because I realized that as the industry was growing, there was a big gap in terms of upskilling the staff to also make sure that brewers are not relying only on YouTube or reading international books, but that there is a locally available training and using my experiences from SAB to actually do that. So Process Craft initially was mainly to do consulting and training, but then what happened is, as I was helping brands develop their recipes, I think my first clients were Shuffle Breweries, Guy in Tembisa, EMP Brewing Company. So it was like my first set of clients. But then they were like, 3,000 is quite a lot of volume to brew. Can we not find a smaller bite-sized brewery to kind of launch the brand? And so the idea of starting up my own brewery then came from that, to say, I'm offering this service, but it gets to a point where I can't move. So how about I actually offer the full service where I do the consulting, launch brands, then be able to actually bring them to life, so that people can then also be able to go out to the market and test these beers in the market and grow volumes. Yes, so that's where then in 2017, 2018, I applied for funding with the IDC to build up my own brewery. But before that, actually, went around trying to get investors. So I did like a full 6 months of presenting the business plan to a few potential investors up until I actually landed up at the IDC.
So what was that like, trying to fundraise? Because that's a completely different job, I guess, than brewing and consulting.
Yes, it was. It was quite interesting actually. It was something outside my comfort zone, something obviously I'd never done before. But as I started meeting and talking to different people and presenting, it also allowed me to kind of, as you get asked questions about what is it that you're trying to do, is it the right time? Do you think it's going to work? And you actually also start questioning your own thinking. Like, is this really it? Will it really work? But for me, I think one of the key things that allowed me to kind of keep going was, I think the trust I'd gained from my clients, because I had people that had written, put in letters of intent saying, you know what, I'm just waiting for you to have the brewery. Which helped obviously when I got to the IDC, because keeping with the IDC, they want evidence. You might have a great idea, but if you don't have proof that you'll be able to bring the idea to life and tangible proof, your business plan will probably just sit in the shelf. So for me, I walked into the IDC already with clients, and so that helped a lot.
And how was that whole process with the IDC?
It was a very difficult process. It was a process that took over 6 months. Initially, I think for me, the initial phase, I did a presentation of what I wanted to do and where I thought it was going, and because they've got different stages, so you pass the first stage, and then the second stage, then you scrutinize the whole business plan. So there was a lot of back and forth, to give more evidence, substantiate the plan, financial projections, and so by the time that took us probably just over 6 months. So by the time they were ready to actually grant, the market research had kind of, how craft that it was like, even now it's ever changing every month. It's an ever changing thing. So by the time they were ready to grant the funding, I had to redo the market, resubmit a market research because, they were like, things have changed since the first time we spoke. Are you sure this, is it still a viable business? So it was a lot of work. And I think, I've had people that have asked me, how did I manage to get through? And for me, because I also did my own business plan. I didn't get a consultant.
Yeah.
So I was able to answer any questions they asked because I'd gone and did the research by myself. I had gotten to a point where I've been in the industry for a few years to have learned from those who were there before and to kind of have an idea of where things could potentially be going. So that helped with my application.
Do they have mentors that helped you through the process?
Yeah, so what they do is they within the team, they'll have someone who specializes in marketing, so who would focus on the marketing side of your business plan. And then the ones who actually ask more questions related to that, and there's someone who deals with the financial side of your business plan. So I had different meetings with the different team members,
Okay.
and they individually will then write a report, which will go to the team leader, who will then compile one report that goes to the committee. So each one would have their view whether the business makes sense or it doesn't, what support post, because they also look at post-investment support. So they will identify gaps within the business. So the fact that I don't have financial background, I'm just a brewer, so that was obviously a big gap that I needed to have financial support post-investment. So they do that for the whole business to identify gaps, and then within the funding, they will put some funds aside for what they call business support.
Okay. So was it a good experience?
Yes, it was. I think for me, it was. If I had to do it again, obviously now I am older and a bit wiser. At that time, I just had this thing that, whatever it takes, I just need to get this money and I just need to start this thing. And not, whereas now I know a bit more and I know better. I would do it again, but I think I'll do it differently. If I could go back, I'll do it a bit differently. It was, I think for me also, what happened thereafter with COVID and, having to close down and have to, there were clauses that when you were signing, you're like, what are the chances? What are the probabilities? Some of them you don't even really like, as long as I get the money. And obviously now the last 2 years have, the world was upside down. Things were not what we all had thought they would be. And things changed, which obviously then also affected that deal.
Did you feel that they were happy to have somebody of your profile? There can't be many black brewers applying to start a little craft brewery.
Yeah, so I think, I know people who have applied. Also, I know like Soweto Brewing, for example, was part funded by IDC also. Okay. I think they were actually the first craft brewery that they funded. So mine was the second. Okay. So they used that as like. And at that time, it was after they've just sold. So when I went to the IDC, it was during that time when they were selling to Heineken.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of that was used as like a case study or learning.
Yeah.
And some of the things that happened in that deal or things that they felt could have been handled differently in that deal were obviously then used in my deal. And as a result, everyone that applies now after me, they're going to have a tough time because they're going to use, my deal as a reference point. And unfortunately, for me, and I've said to the guys that COVID was something that none of us could have foreseen, and it would have been, it's a bit unfair to use that time to judge the business because we don't know what could have happened if it wasn't for COVID. We don't know whether it would have folded or would have been the best, it would have thrived. No one
Yeah.
knows, and we will never know. So it becomes a bit unfair, I think, then too. But unfortunately, that's how it's going to be.
Yeah, so I mean the difference between Soweto Brewery and yours couldn't have been bigger. They sold their brewery, I guess, when Heineken was very upbeat and positive about the industry, and probably too upbeat. And when you really got a bloody nose from COVID.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, for me, that was also part of the market section of the submission, that you say, you know what, the industry is growing. If you've got a big giant like Heineken who's willing to spend millions on buying a brand and wanting to build that brand, but that showed that proved that there was something in this industry that was probably worth spending more energy and time on to see how far we can grow. So I think the whole Soweto Heineken deal for me, on the commercial side, in terms of volumes and growth of the industry, worked well.
Yeah, and then when COVID came, Apiwe, I watched you from a distance, and I watched you with tears in my eyes. That was a terrible, terrible time for the whole industry. But I mean, you had just launched your business, and it must have been a terrible time for you.
Yeah, so when COVID, just before COVID, because just a few steps back, by the time we got the funding, which was in, I think it was 2018, when we finally signed everything. One of the conditions was that for them to disperse the funds, that I needed to have a liquor license.
Mm-hmm.
So you know how it is, liquor license, you then have to find premises that you then have to be paying rental. And I didn't have the funds that, the loan amount. So I had to fund all that by myself. And with the licenses, I think 6 months into when they were about ready to issue the license, they didn't realize that, no, actually I should have had the full kit installed for them to grant, for the inspector to do this final sign-off. So then it was like, no, but I can't buy the equipment because the funder is waiting for the license before they release the funds so I can buy the equipment. So that was a big one, because I spent another month back and forth trying to convince the two entities, Gauteng Liquor Board and I, just to say, you know what, I just need to get going. Both of you want the other to do to start, but I'm stuck in the middle. I need the license to get the funds, but I need the funds to get the license approved. So that took another month, which kind of delayed the project. So we finally placed orders like October 2018. The equipment was coming from China, and the bottling plant was Italian. Then I had a few other bits and pieces from Italy and some South African builds. So then we had Chinese New Year. So the plant finally landed, the first bit of it, in just around Easter. Then it was stuck at the Durban Harbour during the Easter holidays. So yeah, finally commissioned June, July. We ran our first brews. August, September, that's when we really started production. Then fast forward 6 months later, we were in a lockdown. So it was at that time when I started also employing more people, just getting ready to really, 2020 was meant to be the year where we really started production, like real production. So yeah, you know how it is. Around the time 2020, we had the speech by our president of the 21 days lockdown, which ended up becoming 2 years, going to 3 years now of the up and down. So it was a very tough time. I mean, for me, first few months, trying to just keep going, applied for all the UIFs that were being on offer. I looked at, I think it was Mid-Giant was doing sanitizers. I tried to see how, I could also turn into making sanitizers. Proved to be quite an expensive exercise. I looked at packaging sanitizers. I looked at launching a non-alcoholic. So I was like one of those crazy moments where like I just need to see the end of the month. And for me, luckily, like our landlord, they were able to give us some payment breaks on the rental. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the same for the loan, so couldn't pay the main loan account, couldn't pay salaries, struggling to pay part of the rental because we were like kept on opening and closing. And I think for me, looking back, one of the key things was the fact that, not only were we just starting, but all the brands that I was contract brewing for were also small businesses in their own rights. So it was not like well-established brands that were able to survive in between. So when we were opened, some of them had stock they had to throw away, so they couldn't afford to brew because also their businesses were self-funded. So it was just a mess. Fast forward June 2021, that's when I just decided, let's just pick up and see what life has in store for us going forward.
One day they'll make a study about the worst timing ever, hey?
It was the worst time ever.
Yeah, and one would think that there is a bit of leniency with somebody like the IDC. I mean, you'd think that they can see that it's not your fault, and that really our country needs entrepreneurs, and especially black and female entrepreneurs. And was there any understanding from their side?
Yeah, it was, without bad-mouthing anyone, it was, it was like, even for me, before finally giving up, I tried to reason, try to make sense of the situation, try to reach the powers that be, to try see, what is possible, I think for me, that's why by the time I decided to close, I was at peace with it because I was like, no, I did all that I could have done within my powers, and it's fine. For me, it was like, this didn't work out. I tried to keep it going. Powers that be, things were just not working out. So how do I now continue, remaining positive and just continue being?
Was it about that time when you started working with BASA?
So I had been voluntarily involved in that. So I actually stepped down from BASA at the end of during COVID, because I was like, I can't volunteer of my time because I need to focus my energies on trying to keep my business going.
Yeah.
And when I closed down, so I went back to the team to say, I am available and I do have time. And I started joining the consultancy within the BASA team. So kind of continued doing most of the stuff that I was doing, but now obviously more structured approach.
What is the role of the Beer Association?
So the Beer Association is an association that represents the beer manufacturers in the country. So on the board, we've got the CEO of SAB Heineken, and the chairperson of the Craft Brewers Association. And the mandate of BASA is basically to promote beer and celebrate all that is beer. So that is and differentiate beer from other alcoholic products, be it on excise, be it on beer culture, creating a beer culture. And that's why we're also working now on beer tourism to celebrate beer within the tourism space, celebrate beer within the agricultural space, and show that that beer is not just a product that we typically see when headlines are talking about drinking and people irresponsibly drinking. We always see a picture of beer, but then when they talk about food pairings, beer culture, tourism. You have other types of alcoholic beverages, and typically not beer. So we're trying to reposition beer in the country as a product of moderate consumption, that can play a role, that does play a role in the upliftment of our communities also.
Okay.
Focus is also now on government because, the policy changes and decisions that are being made by people that are not within the beer community. They're not part of, they don't attend beer festivals, or they don't know about your book. They don't know about all the great work that we're doing. Whereas through BASA, then there's a platform to really engage at the highest level possible, so that we can then, together with the high level and the low level on the groundwork, we all kind of working together to drive the same narrative.
Okay. And tell us a little bit about what you do now. You're still involved with your brand. You've started your own beer brand. I guess you started that earlier, but you're still making that and promoting that.
Since we closed down the brewery, so I decided to focus on that, on growing Tolokazi. And for me, one of the reasons why I decided to do that is because I believe that when COVID happened, or when the alcohol restrictions came about, if I had a strong enough brand in the market that had had a good presence in retail, that had a good brand following, we could have maybe survived, the restrictions. And now it's like looking back to say, okay, fine, how do I regroup? How do I rebuild? So that, kind of create a strong enough brand that whatever happens in the future, it can weather the storms. So whether I get the opportunity to build a brewery again, or whatever the case may be, I would like it to come in when I'm in a better position than where I was before COVID, in terms of, access to market, retail, brand awareness, and so that's kind of like what I've been focusing my energies on now, and see, how the rest of the year unfolds, and up until we get back to our sort of normal, see what life brings after that.
So you need to explain two things to me: the name of the beer, and then Sugumababon.
So the brand is Tolokazi. So Tolokazi is Takazelo Sam, my clan name.
What does that mean? What is a clan name? Is it like a surname?
You might have different surnames, but actually belong to the same clan.
Okay.
So within clans, they also, they're more like below the tribe. So you have the Xhosa nation, and then within the Xhosa nation, you're broken down in different clans. And from there, then you can do surnames and an end.
Okay.
So for me, the reason why I chose that name, because there was a few other names that were on the table for the brand. And Tolokazi became the one because also, when we talk of brewing and how traditionally it still is a role of women across the continent, and those women will typically be called after their clan names. So as a sign of respect, they will not be called by their name. So if I was in the 15th century and brewing in my heart somewhere, people they will say they're going to drink Kwatolokazi or Kwamamtolo. And for me, that's the reason why because it ties in with all the other work I've been doing for the past few years, advocating for women in the industry and celebrating Africa in the global beer space. And so for me, that was what the brand is about. If you look at our label design, when I spoke to my designer, I asked him for something African, but new age Africa, world class. Not what Americans think we are as Africans. Like with giraffes and lions, but something that, I can take to UK, for an example, just launch the beer in UK, that we can look at and say, this is a very good representation of Africa. It's a new age Africa, the new world Africa.
Yeah, that is amazing, and you need to tell that story all the time, and you need to repeat it.
Yes, not getting tired, not anytime soon.
Yeah. And then your slogan, Sukuma Bakukbona.
Yes. So interestingly, that is also something that across the African cultures, languages, and tribes is something that everyone resonates with. It loosely translates that stand up so the world, so that they see you.
Yes.
So typically, if just to put it in context, if let's say a man is like proud of his wife and he's taken her to like a village meeting or imbis or whatever they might have done in the olden days, and he wanted everyone to know that is his wife, and he's like extremely proud of her, and so they will say Tolokazi phakama bakubona, as in like stand up so the whole village can see that I chose you out of all the other women and other ladies in the village. So for me, that then applied to the brand is that Tolokazi as a brand should, stand for Africa as a whole to see and the world to see and taste that, is what we can offer here in the tip of Africa.
And I got it wrong. I said Sukuma, but it's Pagam.
It's Pagama. No, but Sukuma in Zulu, but it's Sukuma. So actually, Zulu will say Sukuma or Pagama, depending on who you're talking to. But it means the same thing. So Sukuma, Pagama, yeah.
Yeah, and I needed this interview so that I could say that. Yeah. Apiwe, so one of the highlights in my life were in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And we were in George, and I got onto a bus full of strangers, and there was one person that got up and welcomed me with open arms and made me feel part of the family, and that was you. Can you remember that?
Yes, I actually saw pictures the other day, and it was like, actually, that was like the first time where we physically met. But it feels like forever.
Yeah. And just to paint the pictures, this was a bus full of white males who probably drank way too much and spoke too much and had big voices like Adam Scott. And the person that was really in charge was Apiwe, because you were in charge of that group of men, and we went down just to explain on a hop tour with Dani Odendaal. And that was a wonderful experience, and I just admired the way you fitted in and how you managed to deal with all these men. What are your memories of that tour?
I think for me it was it was just one of those things where wherever I'm in the space, this whole thing of sitting in a corner and feel that you're different, you stand out. So it's like, I'm here. I'm not here by chance, I'm here because I want to be here, and this is where I need to be, and let's just have fun and in the process learn as much as we can about each other, about the industry, and yeah. I just want to say that I take my hat off to you, how you approach this thing, and I mean the result is that we really appreciate and honor you within the brewing circles, I think. No, thank you so much.
I said the one thing that you can't seem to get away from is training and uplifting other people in the beverage industry or in the brewing industry. What are you doing at the moment, and What are your ambitions?
Yeah, I think for me that is actually kind of core to who I am and where I'm about, and that is the legacy I'd like to leave behind. Not just a bottled product. The headlines are claim to fame, first black female to own a brewery. I'm like, but obviously in 2022, it's not something we should really be celebrating as a country. It should be a norm. It should be like, oh, okay, yeah, another one. Okay, shouldn't even be a thing. But unfortunately, it is. And for me, it's about, what can I do within my powers, within my networks, and within the connections that I have to make sure that I'm not the first and the last, and also to make it a norm, to talk about it, and make those who might feel left on the outside that actually, there is no fence, there is no so and so is allowed, so and so is not allowed. Anyone who feels they can participate within the industry, they should be able to get in and do what they want to do. So so at the moment, my focus is on not just the brand, but also to continue opening up the space for more young entrepreneurs to get into the industry, and not just beer. I think in my journey I've had people who are even outside of the beverages, like, because there's wine people that want to do gins, but interestingly, even outside of beverages, within the food space, people that are like, I never thought it was even possible, but seeing you do it, it's giving me hope that, what, I can also do it. And for me, that's what makes me sleep well at night. I've been told that I'll probably die poor because because I care more about the next person, which is, for me, it's about Ubuntu, and that's who we are as Africans. I am because we are, and if we forget that and we all chase the millions, how going, for us to travel, how they're saying that go alone, you may go far or whatever, but if you go together, you get further. For me, that's like my thinking to say, if I take other people with on the journey, it opens up things for me also, but also opens up, for everyone else. And that's what I want to continue doing. So at the moment, I am planning a seminar, because I've seen a lot of people would like ask me to mentor them, or they would call me asking me for advice, and I don't have time. As much as I would love to help everyone, but I just don't have the practically time to do it. So I thought, why don't I organize a seminar, invite other people within the industry, and also outside of beer. So I've got people that will talk about gin, their experiences starting up a wine brand. And the idea for me there is just to share knowledge and experiences, and so that people that are coming after us don't have to repeat some of our mistakes. That's kind of like the stuff I do, and just continue celebrating Africa and brewing in Africa in all ways or forms.
Apiwe, where can people find out more about you and this seminar?
So the seminar is on the 27th of May this year. It's going to be here in Johannesburg, in Bloemfontein. And then we're also going to do a virtual version so people can actually stream in. And it is the tickets are currently available online at Quicket, and also on my social media. If you follow me on social media, you will definitely come across it.
Okay, we'll post your link to your LinkedIn or something on in the show notes. Apiwe, thank you for your time. Thank you for your inspiration, and thank you for what you do for our country and for changing our hearts one heart at a time.
Yes, no, it takes that. It takes one person at a time, and before we know it, we'll all have forgotten we even had this chat.
Thanks, Apiwe.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to our stories here online. In the show notes, you will also find a link where you can subscribe to become part of our community and be notified when we upload our latest content.